Assalamualaikum student, welcome to the e-classes of Sufa English High School. This is Shazia Khan, subject teacher of SST. Today I am going to teach standard 7 part history chapter number 4 Maharashtra before the times of Shivaji Maharaj. So let's start. At the beginning of the 17th century CE, most of the territory in Maharashtra was under the control of Nizam Shah of Ahmednagar and Adil Shah of Bijapur. The Mughals had entered Khandesh. Their objective was to expand their power in south. There were settlements of Siddhi people who had come from America along the coastline of Konkan. The competition and conflicts among the Portuguese, the British, the French, and the Dutch who had come from Europe was getting intense. During this period, there was stiff competition among them to capture the market for trade. The Portuguese had already established their rule in Goa and Vasai on the western coastline. The British, the Dutch, and the French had found an entry through the medium of trading companies. By setting up factories, all these powers assessed the strength of order. Other powers kept themselves safe and tried to dominate as much as possible. This conflict had created instability and insecurity in Maharashtra. These different people from Europe were called Topkar on the basis of their customary headgear. Now, what does this paragraph mean? This paragraph is at the beginning of the 17th century, most of the territory in Maharashtra was under the control of Nizam Shah of Ahmednagar and Adil Shah of Bijapur. The objectives of the Mughals to expand their power in south. Different people from Europe were identified on the basis of their customary headgear. कस्टमरी हेड गेयर मीन्स उनके रिवाज के जरिए वो जाने जाते थे. ओके, all these powers asserted the strength of other powers, kept themselves safe, and tried to dominate as much as possible. It is necessary to get acquainted with the village, Mauja, Kasba and Pargana to understand the nature of settlement in that period, as also of the officers that formed a link between the rulers and their subjects, and also the market and the craftsmen. Pargana was made up of many villages. Generally, the headquarters of a Pargana was called Kasba. A village smaller than a Kasba was called Mauja. Let us get acquainted in brief with village, Kasba and Pargana respectively. Now, many villages together form a Pargana. Okay, the headquarters of Pargana is Kasba. Another name for a village, Mauja. Chief of the village, Patil. Example of Kasba, Indapur, Kasba of Indapur, Pargana. Why Kasba, why Pargana. Okay, now village Mauja. Most of the people lived in village. A village was also called Mauja. The chief of the village was the Patil. He used to try to bring maximum land under cultivation. When there was any dispute in the village, the Patil resolved it and made peace. A Kulkarni helped the Patil in his work. The Kulkarni kept the record of the revenue that was collected. There were various artisans in the village. They had hereditary rights regarding their occupation. The peasants gave a share of their agriculture produce to artisans for the service they rendered to village community. This share was known as baluta. Now in this paragraph, most of the people lived in village. Village was also called moja. Okay, the chief of the village was Patil. When there were any disputes means झगड़ा या दंगा फसाद in the village, the पाटिल resolved it and made peace. तो उसको पाटिल जो है वो रिसॉल्व करते थे और वहाँ शांति बनाए रखते थे. The Kulkarni kept the record of the revenue that was collected, और Kulkarni kept the record of all the revenue. There were various artisans in the village. Okay, student. Now, next paragraph. Kasbah. Kasbah was like a big village. It was usually the headquarters of Pargana. Example: Indapur Kasbah of Indapur Pargana, Y Kasbah of Y Pargana. The headquarters of those parganas, agriculture was the main occupation. There were skilled artisans like carpenters, blacksmiths, etc. in a kasbah. There was usually a market pet adjacent to a kasbah. The Sheikh and Mahajan were the watandars of the pet. Every village did not necessarily have a pet. The setting up of a pet was the job of the Seths and the Mahajans. For that, they received some land from the government and some right from the villagers. The Mahajan maintained the account of the pet. Now, main occupation of the people is agriculture. Watandars of the pet. Watandars means a market, the Seth and the Mahajan. Now the Mahajan maintained accounts of the pet. Watandar officers Deshmukh and Deshpande. Okay, student. Now Pargana. Many villages together made a Pargana, but the number of villages was not the small in all Parganas. For example, the Pune Pargana was a big Pargana. It consisted of 290 villages. There were 64 villages in the Chakan Pargana. The Shirwal Pargana was small. It had only 40 villages. The Deshmukh and the Deshpande were the Watandars. The Deshmukh and the Deshpande were the Watandars officer of the Pargana. The Deshmukh was the chief of party in a Pargana. The Deshmukh did at the Pargana level what the party did at the village level. The Deshpande was the chief of all Kulkarnis in the Pargana. Deshpande did at the Pargana level the work that Kulkarnis did at the village level. These Watandars officers were the link between the people and the government. In case of any enemy invasion or drought, these Watandars represented the grievance of the people to the government. Sometimes these officers misused their powers. They collected more money from the people than was due, or did or not remit the money so collected on the government in times. On such occasions, the people suffer harassment. Now, in this paragraph, many villages together formed a Pargana. The headquarters of Pargana is Kasbah. Now, for example, the Pune Pargana was a big Pargana. It consisted 290 villages. पुणे में 290 villages है, and there were 64 villages in the Chakan Pargana. Okay student, it had only 40 villages. The Deshmukh and the Deshpande were the Watandars officer of the Pargana. The Deshpande was the chief of all Kulkarnis in the Pargana. Now the Watandars officer were the link between the people and the government. Watandars of the people between the people and the government. In case of any enemy's invention means आक्रमण, कोई भी दुश्मन का अगर आक्रमण होता है, these वतनदार्स represented their grievance of the people to the government. They collected more money from the people than was due or did not remit the money so collected on the government in time. Okay, now the calamity of a famine. Agriculture was dependent on rainwater. If it did not rain, crops would fail. The price of food grains rose. It became difficult for the people to get food grains, and another thing, there was no fodder for the cattle. Water became scarce. It became difficult for people to live in the village. They were forced to leave the village. A famine was a great calamity for the people. A great famine occurred in Maharashtra in 1630 CE. People were greatly distressed due to this famine. It has been described in these words: people were ready to sell themselves for a piece of bhakri, but there was nobody to buy them. There was a very severe scarcity of food grains. Entire families were destroyed. Cattle and farm animals died. Agriculture was devastated. The famine put an end to industries. All the financial transaction came to a standstill. People had to wander to faraway region in search of a livelihood. It was a great challenge to bring back to normalcy the distressed life of the people. Now, calamity of famine. Calamity of famine means agriculture was dependent on rainwater. In that time, agriculture is depend on rainwater, monsoon water. If it did not rain, crop would फेल. अगर वहाँ बारिश नहीं होती है तो पूरी फसल जो है वो ख़राब हो जाती है. द प्राइस ऑफ फूड ग्रेन्स रोज, और जो अनाज की प्राइस है वो बढ़ जाती थी. देयर वॉज नो फॉडर फॉर द कैटल. जानवरों के लिए भी वहाँ पर कुछ नहीं रहता था. वाटर बिकेम स्केर्स. वहाँ का जो पानी है वो डर जाता था. They were forced to leave the village. और वहाँ से लोगों को जो विलेज वो छोड़ के जाना पड़ा. A great time famine occurred in Maharashtra in 630 CE. People were greatly distressed due to this famine. There was a severe scarcity of food grains. Cattle and farm animals died. Agriculture was devastated. All financial transactions came to a stand still. Okay student, now the work of the workery movement. Society was greatly influenced by blind beliefs and rituals. People had become fatalistic and inert. They had lost all innate. The condition of the common people was miserable. In such circumstances, the Sant in Maharashtra endeavored to inspire the masses. In Maharashtra, the tradition of sants, which began with Sant Dhaneshwar and Namdev, was carried on by sants coming from various strata of the society. People from all strata of society were part of the Sant tradition. For example, Sant चौकमेला, संत गोरबा, संत सेना, संत सावता, संत नारहरी, संत शेख मोहम्मद एक्सेट्रा, संत चौकाबा वाइफ, संत सोयराबाई एंड सिस्टर, संत निर्मलाबाई, संत मुक्ता, संत जनाबाई. Okay, student, now the link between the government. Sometimes these officers misuse their power and harassed the people. A great phenomenon occurred in Maharashtra in 1630 AD. In Maharashtra, the tradition of Sant began with Sant Dhaneshwar and Sant Namdev. Some women Sant were Sant Muktabai, Sant Janabai, Sant Nirmalabai, Sant Soirabai. Okay. Sant Dhaneshwar brought the Bhavarta, Deepikas or Dhaneshwari. Now they had lost all initiative. The condition of the common people was miserable. In such circumstances, the Sant in Maharashtra endeavored to inspire the masses. Which began in Maharashtra, the tradition of Sant which began with Sant Dhaneshwar. Okay, student, it is enough for today. We will continue in the next video. Thank you.